In the years following the American Revolution, a young nation sought to define itself amid eternal discord and a looming specter of division. As the 19th century dawned, from the bustling streets of Washington, D.C. to the sprawling plantations of Mississippi, two distinct visions of America clashed and converged in a dance of ideology and ambition. Abraham Lincoln, born in a humble Kentucky log cabin, would grow with tales of unity and democracy ringing in his ears. His journey through law and politics was shaped by an unwavering belief in a united nation. To the south, another child of the same era, Jefferson Davis. Raised amidst the tradition and affluence of a Mississippi plantation, would come to embody the Southern cause, championing states' rights and the preservation of a way of life. The air was thick with tension as fiery debates in Congress mirrored the tempestuousness of town hall meetings. From the Missouri Compromise to the divisive Dred Scott decision, every policy, every law seemed to drive a wedge further and further between the North and the South. As Lincoln and Davis rose in the political echelons, they became emblematic of their region's ideals and the burgeoning conflicts that would threaten to tear the nation apart. As the 1860s beckoned, the storm clouds of war gathered, casting a shadow over a country grappling with its identity. Were Lincoln and Davis merely pawns of destiny, caught in the tumultuous currents of their time? Or were they the very embodiment of the ideals and divisions that defined the era? How did the passionate debates and political maneuverings pave the way for a conflict that would decide the soul of a nation? Join us on this episode of Historical Quarrels as we traverse the tumultuous path leading to civil war. Echoing the insights of the historian Barbara Cookman, who observed, "History is the unfolding of miscalculations." Let's delve into the decisions and missteps that set Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis on a collision course with history. Welcome back to Historical Quarrels, the NSFW podcast, that means not safe for work, about historic wars and rivalries that never derails from the information and definitely would never fake people out with facts that sound plausible enough, but in all reality, it's just a big joke that maybe 1 to 2 people laugh at. Those people being me and hopefully you. So, announcements for today are first and foremost, my God. Honestly, thank you, everyone who shared last week's episode and for the emails and feedback I received. It really does help out the show a lot. And if you have found value in the show or at any point in today's episode, please leave a review and share it with a friend. Thank you. Second, my friends and I are planning on creating and owning an LLC to host our shows together under one umbrella, rather than just under the Historical Quarrels name. This will lead to the YouTube channel receiving a different name, but the show names are going to be staying the same. So you don't have to worry about Historical Quarrels getting a different name or Hard Homies getting a different name, because it's definitely always been Hard Homies Podcast. Never has been called anything else. But yeah, you don't have to worry about that. We're just going to get an LLC, and essentially the YouTube channel is just going to become like the center for all of the other episodes of the podcasts. And I mean, you can still just get the podcasts by themselves and not have to search up the LLC name, just by going on Apple Podcasts and by following us on there. So, and if we release any other shows, it'll be under that LLC umbrella. This will just make it easier, especially once we start doing merch and a couple other things that we are talking about doing, to have it all be listed under one big scope. I don't have to worry about, okay, these sales are doing better here or these sales are doing better here. I mean, I'll probably take a look at the numbers anyways to see which merch is being bought more, if it's, being bought more from Hard Homies or Historical Quarrels, but that's besides the point. We're not there yet. We're creating an LLC name, and once that's up, and that'll change the YouTube channel, and I just need to announce that to you guys. And speaking of the other shows, please go check out Hard Homies Podcast after today's episode. for some laughs and more casual conversation. Also, we are planning on eventually doing some Patreon content as well. So if you'd like to support the show, please go check out our Patreon that's currently under the name of Historical Quarrels. That will change once the production company name is decided upon and LLC and the rights and everything to it is bought. So for today's episode, we are picking up right where we left off last episode on the Revolutionary War, continuing the last bit of Sam and John Adams' life, and then starting the lives of Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis and how their actions would be influenced by their background culture and how they would eventually cause more of a divide in political thought. Or really it's not that they cause it, but they would be a big factor in the Civil War, right? They were in politics by the time the division started to really erode. And really, this division is going to be caused by John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. It starts there with the Federalist and Anti-Federalists, but we'll kind of get into it. Not as much as I'd like to. I'm probably going to do a full episode on John Adams and Thomas Jefferson one day, but just their political campaign because it's hilarious. Anyways, continuing on. So after that, we're going to culminate in the Civil War. We'll continue on to Lincoln's assassination and Davis's capture, and then release and go over some policies that happened after the war that would continue the political rift in America. And then after that, in the following episode, we're actually going to get up into modern times. So we're going to still continue in the 1800s, get up to the 1900s, and we're going to talk about the civil rights movement in the following episode as kind of like, and then a soliloquy kind of going into where we are at today. For the current political climate and the divide and how America has been kind of evolving and shifting back and forth on the divide. And it seems more extremist groups are happening now. So that's what we have to worry about. I do want to note there are very sensitive topics that would be brought up today. And as a white man, I do not feel it is my place to give nuance to slavery and how horrible it was. I don't want to really give nuance at all. There'll be probably some things that are said during this that's just more informational based, specifically with Jeff Davis, and how he actually really didn't. I mean, he wanted to keep slavery as an option because he viewed it as like some people's way of life and how they made money. But he cared more about states' rights being able to self-govern than he did about slavery. In all honesty, I think he might have been willing to do away with slavery, but his state wasn't willing to. And that was, he had to kind of like bow out with his constituents. And he just got elected as the Confederate president. That being said, I will discuss people's reasoning back then and make fun of them for it. The primary justification for slavery was the Bible verses in Genesis where Noah got pissed after his son saw him drunk and naked and covered him up. So he cursed his kids' sons to be servants forever. The Canaanites, Canaanites or Canaanites, however you want to pronounce it. Essentially he got naked, got drunk. His kid came in, covered him up, and he was like, "How dare you cover up my nakedness? Stare at my meat shaft. And because you didn't stare at my meat shaft, fuck your kids." which is hilarious in so many ways. So first of all, the Canaanites primarily live in the southern Levant, which, if you don't know, is near modern-day Egypt and Iraq. It's also considered part of... If you want to consider the Levant anything, it's also considered for like Turkey, Greece, and actually some other European countries. But, white people can't admit that ever because, oh my God, that would mean their whole slavery shtick was completely wrong and they didn't know geography at all. Which, to be fair, many of them didn't. But so essentially them getting slaves from Africa and saying they are Canaanites is geographically wrong. They are nowhere near, maybe part. There might have been some Africans that had traveled up there, but they mostly would have been Palestinian, actually. So the Palestinians are the ones who are supposed to be servants. And it's another reason why we have so many conflicts in the Middle East is because of this shit, too. But anyways, and if they are taking that story literally, you know, the story about a dad getting mad his kid didn't want to see his meat. Since it's the Old Testament, shouldn't the Canaanites only serve the Jewish people since they are God's people? And also, didn't Jesus come in and say, hey, those old laws and shit are done with now, and everyone's equal in my eyes? I don't know. It really was just those racist fucks just liked having their cake and eating it too. It was a useful tool to convince the slaves of their place as well, since they typically weren't allowed to read for themselves and couldn't point out how fucking dumb of an argument that it was. So I'll be refuting any nonsense like that and pointing out what it was, which was the exploitation of less fortunate people who were captured and forced into slavery so they could be used to keep rich farmers' fields taken care of and keep those farmers rich. Also, so those farmers didn't have to work as hard. But yeah, with all that being said, let's get into today's historical quarrel. You are listening to Historical Quarrels. So, continuing from where we left off last time, let's talk about Samuel's tenure as the governor of Massachusetts. The late 18th century saw Samuel Adams transition from a fiery revolutionary to a seasoned statesman. And by the 1790s, his role as one of the driving forces behind the American Revolution was already solidified in the annals of history. Yet his political journey was far from over. Elected as governor of Massachusetts, Samuel Adams stepped into a position of considerable power and responsibility, a far cry from his days of clandestine meetings in Boston taverns, drinking and gambling and whoring the night away, as Samuel Adams was very well known for. Samuel's tenure as governor, which began in 1794 and continued until 1797. Could you imagine 1997? Fucking lived 200 years, 203 years. I already at that age. Was marked by a balanced approach, blending his revolutionary zeal with pragmatic understanding and governance. He was known to be as fierce in his elderly years as he was when he was younger. He routinely would purposely rile up a young upstart by the name of Andrew Jackson, basically calling him a pussy and shit. Here are some letters he wrote to Andrew during his time of governor while Andrew was 30. Sir, I find myself impelled, out of a mixture of amusement and curiosity, to pen this correspondence. Having been privy to tales of your endeavors, and more pertinently to your name, I find it rather hard to believe that a man christened Andrew could ever hope to wrest control from the likes of the Spanish or the Creek. To my ear, Andrew sounds more befitting of a mild-mannered poet or a doting gardener than a man of war in action. I dare say, if I was Spaniard or a member of the Creek Nation, I'd hardly quiver at the thought of an Andrew coming my way. Why, it's akin to fearing a lamb named Fluffy, my charge. I wager that with such a delicate name, you'd be more apt to ask the Creek and the Spanish for tea and biscuits than to challenge their territorial claims, and heaven forbid they refuse, lest you respond with a sternly written poem, or, at worst, a very cross stitch. Now, sir, I have observed many things in my time, and I am yet to see a daisy uproot a mighty oak. Damn. I'd be generally astonished if you were the first Andrew to change that natural order. But I jest. Perhaps it is the destiny of those with soft names to surprise the world and redefine expectations. Should you ever wish to prove my jest unfounded, you know where to direct your energies. Wishing you the strength of a Sam and the courage of an Adams. Yours truly, Samuel Adams. He also wrote him this. Sir, recently I chanced upon a young lad from the Creek Nation, who in his youthful bravado remarked that he had heard tales of the mighty Andrew Jackson. And to my great amusement, he followed this musing by that from the stories you sounded more like a tender-footed bard than a warrior. I must admit, upon reflection and given the gentle lilt of your name, I found myself inclined to share in the boy's sentiment. To think that a name like Andrew would resonate fear and respect among the Creek? Why, it'd be as if they trembled at the thought of a wee butterfly named Petunia. In another amusing tale, I happened upon a Spaniard in my travels who, upon hearing your name, assumed you to be a lovely senorita, known for her radiant beauty and dulce voice. Now I had to laugh at that image. The feared Andrew Jackson mistaken for a dainty damsel twirling in a Spanish courtyard. But just aside, perhaps names do belie the true nature of a man. Maybe the Creek and the Spaniards are in for a surprise when they face them out of Andrew. May your actions silence the chuckles of the young Creek and confused Spaniards. Yours in camaraderie, Sam Adams. Many historians will point to these letters as they would lead Andrew Jackson getting angry enough to take over Florida away from the Spanish and conquering the Creek nation's lands that would later become Georgia and Alabama. This also provides context to why he fucking hated John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams, and created the Democratic Party out of sheer fucking spite of the Adams family. Back to Sam, though. Massachusetts, a hub of commerce and intellectualism, was grappling with post-revolutionary challenges, from economic downturns to issues of state rights versus federal authority. One of the significant challenges during Samuel's governorship was the aftermath of Shays' Rebellion, which had occurred a few years earlier in 1786 to 87, if you don't remember from last episode. While the rebellion was quelled before Adams took office, its echoes were palpable. The insurrection had revealed deep-seated economic disparities and discontent among Massachusetts' rural population. As governor, Samuel had to address these economic grievances while ensuring that law and order were maintained. His main method for maintaining the peace was through the brutal and efficient method of having each person's family that was involved in the rebellion be brought into an arena, and each family would fight to the death, and the winner would be allowed to leave after they ate a bowl of chili with meat that was made from the fresh corpses of their family they just murdered. It was said Sam had learned this method of rebellion quelling after studying the history of the Ottomans and how they quelled a rebellion during their first siege of Constantinople. This is, of course, as true as the letters he sent to Andrew Jackson. If you bought that he instigated Jackson into winning battles like that, please let me know. That would be wonderful. Anyway, during his tenure, Adams worked to strengthen the state's infrastructure, endorsing policies that boosted trade and commerce, recognizing the importance of a vibrant economy. He supported measures that would ensure Massachusetts remained a leading trade hub in the new nation. However, Samuel Adams was not one to forget his revolutionary roots. A staunch advocate for individual rights, he often found himself at odds with the increasing centralization tendencies of the federal government. The rise of the Alien and Sedition Acts under John Adams, his cousin, his presidency would have certainly garnered Samuel's criticism, echoing his lifelong stand for individual freedoms against overarching authority. As he was the guy who was like, fuck the crown, and went and did the Boston Tea Party. Allegedly did the Boston Tea. We all fucking know he did it. I mean, he was the one who was, pen name populist during his time starting all that shit. So, anyways, Samuel's time as governor also witnessed the emergence of political parties. The divisions between Federalists and Democratic Republicans, or Anti-Federalists, were becoming more pronounced. While Samuel leaned towards the Democratic Republican ideals, he often emphasized unity and collaboration, echoing the sentiments of his inaugural address where he mentioned, "United we stand, divided we fall," something that Lincoln would come to use. His correspondence from this period provides a window into his thoughts. In a letter to John Adams, he wrote, "Though our paths diverge, cousin, our destination is singular, a thriving and just republic." And by the end of his governorship in 1797, Sam Adams had left an indelible mark on Massachusetts' political landscape. His leadership, a blend of revolutionary fervor and astute governance, ensured that Massachusetts remained at the forefront of the early American Republic. It was a fitting chapter in the life of a man who had dedicated himself to the cause of liberty and the birth of a nation. Sam would die just 6 years later in 1803 due to spastic rectal disorder, now known as proctalgia fugax, which is a pretty shitty end if you ask me. So anyways, as the 19th century dawned on the American Republic, political winds shifted in a direction that few could have predicted a mere decade prior. The early 1800s were characterized by the ascendancy of the Democratic Republican Party, and this period's hallmark event was Thomas Jefferson's election in 1800, often dubbed the Revolution of 1800. The backdrop was a nation in flux. The controversies of the 1790s, from the Alien Sedition Acts to the fierce debates between Federalist and Democratic Republicans, or anti-Federalists, had laid bare the philosophical divides within the fledgling country. At the heart of these debates were questions about the nature and role of the federal government, individual rights, and the broader vision of America. Essentially, they're like, should there be a stronger central power that tells everybody what the fuck to do, or should we just let states kind of do their own thing? And in my opinion, I think there needs to be obviously a balance. And I think most people's opinions back then, there had to be a balance. But figuring out what that balance was tricky as fuck. Because on one hand, if you let states just do whatever the fuck they wanted, people could go from state to state and get arrested for different shit. I mean, like in today's time, you can go to Washington, smoke weed and be fine. But then if you go over to Utah and smoke weed, you're probably going to get arrested, at least out in public, you know. I wish they wouldn't, but it's whatever. But that's what it is. And kind of same thing here. But before they centralized the financial system, everyone was creating their own economy and currency. And that caused a bunch of issues for America early on, and what nearly brought them to war with France and with Europe again, which would have been really bad, obviously. So there needs to be somewhat of a strong central figure and authority that has overarching laws, and then states need to have some things that they can decide as well. They shouldn't be able to decide everything, but definitely should be able to decide a lot of kind of smaller, less impactful things for the country, at least in my opinion. And Thomas Jefferson, who is the co-author of the Kentucky Resolution and a vociferous critic of the Adams administration, emerged as the Democratic-Republican candidate in the 1800 presidential election. Opposing him was the incumbent John Adams, representing the Federalists. The election itself was bitter and rife with personal attacks, reflecting the deep-seated animosities of the era. And I mean, this shit was wild, and things got ugly fast. Jefferson's camp accused President Adams of having a, quote, hideous, hermaphroditical character, which has neither the force and firmness of a man, nor the gentleness and sensibility of a woman. They fucking called him a hermaphrodite, dude. Wild. And then in return, Adams' men called Vice President Jefferson a mean-spirited, low-lived fellow, and the son of a half-breed Indian squaw, sired by a Virginia mulatto father. He called him a fucking half-breed, dude. This shit was wild. Which is even the worst of what was said. The correspondence between these two was filled with nothing but insults and threats. Now, a lot of this was stemming from the fighting between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, now known as the Democratic Republican Party, as Jefferson and Hamilton. I should also mention Alexander Hamilton was a big part of this. Had viewed what Adams had done in his presidency, while Jefferson was his vice president, which is a whole other bag of worms. That's right. Thomas Jefferson was John Adams' vice president. Just back then, the way the voting system worked was wild. So he had viewed what he had done in his presidency as being heretical and monarchist, which is to say he viewed Adams as someone who supported the British and the crown, which is really close to tyranny. It wasn't entirely true, as Adams would opt for neutrality. Goddamn. Neutrality. I can speak English. Look at me. I'm so good. I'm the goodest boy in European conflicts. But mainly did so because America really couldn't afford to go to war again to help the French with the revolution, which is a little fucked up since they helped us, but it's whatever. And because of all that, and all the behind-the-back high school gossip girl shit talking, these two did. It nearly completely normalized mudslinging and political campaigns this early on in America. Luckily, that would change and kind of stop for a while, but then seemed to make a comeback in the 1900s. And honestly, most political campaigns became like somewhat mudslingy-ish. And then lately, in this past, for us here in America, this past election, definitely mudslinging. And the one prior to that, definitely mudslinging. It's fun. Great. That's how I love to decide who wins, is just whoever had the better insult. Anyways, what made the 1800 election so revolutionary wasn't just the transfer of power from one party to another, it was the nature of that transfer. Despite the heated, and I mean fucking heated rhetoric and dire predictions from both sides, the change in leadership was peaceful. Take that as a lesson, MAGA, you fucking idiots. These, really, you extremists. Jefferson called him a hermaphrodite, and these motherfuckers were like launching a lot of threats at each other, and they still transferred power peacefully. It solidified the principle that in the United States, political power is bestowed by the ballot, not the bullet. Good thing for some people to remember with America's upcoming election next year. Really hope people remember that. And I know conspiracy theories are fun and all, but the fucking war I'm going to describe to you today would pale in comparison to the absolute destruction that would be done if America erupted in a civil war again. Mostly by the insurrectionists. You guys would be fucking wiped off the face of the planet so goddamn fast unless you somehow were able to control the military. You'd have to be able to control the military and then start the insurrection. That's insane. That's insane to think about and probably impossible for you to do. At least I really hope you can't, because I don't want to live in the world that you want to live in. Assholes. Anyways, Jefferson's victory marked a turning point. His inaugural address aimed to heal the divisions. He would say, "We are all Republicans, we are all Federalists," he declared, emphasizing unity over partisanship. His presidency saw the Louisiana Purchase, which doubled the nation's size, and the Lewis and Clark expedition, but also grappled with issues like the internal slave trade and relations with Native American tribes. And the way he dealt with those issues was primarily a policy of, fuck you, we do what we want. He just fucked over everyone that wasn't white, essentially. He also literally fucked a bunch of people who weren't white as well. My God, that man had a weird love-hate relationship with his slaves. Should I ever do a full episode on Jefferson and John Adams, I will go way deeper into their history than the crazy shit they did/said during their time, because my God, it is all fantastic. And I would have an easy 2 to 3 hours, worth of material, just based off of what they've done. But this series is more focused on America's divide and the Civil War and the split between Democrats and Republicans and what has caused it for so long. And a lot of it stemmed from, the original culture of Puritans and separatists, and it kind of morphed into Federalists and Anti-Federalists, and has honestly kind of stayed that way for the past 200 years. So, beyond 200 years, 200 plus years. So, the Revolution of 1800 had another profound impact. It signaled the decline of the Federalist Party. And within a few years, the Federalists would fade from national prominence, and the Democratic Republicans would dominate the political landscape. The dominance would not go unchallenged, of course. As the nation grew and evolved, new issues would arise, and new parties would emerge. But the early 1800s set a precedent of peaceful transition and party evolution. John Adams, although defeated, played a vital role in this peaceful transition. In his correspondence with his wife Abigail, he expressed both disappointment and his hopes for the nation. He said, "Though we may differ in our courses," he wrote, "the harbor remains the same, a prosperous and free America." Kind of like how Sam wrote to him telling him that. The rise of the Democratic Republicans also laid the groundwork for future political evolutions. The values and principles they championed, from states' rights to agrarianism, would shape American politics for decades to come. And during these decades, an important figure would be born. In 1809, Abraham Lincoln, often revered as one of the United States' most iconic presidents, which I completely agree with, was born February 12th in 1809 in a log cabin on the Sinking Spring Farm in what is now known as LaRue County, formerly Hardin County, Kentucky. That's right, he's a Kentucky boy. The humble circumstances of his birth and later significance in politics and fame remind me of the poet A. Levine in their poem, Skater Boy. Go ahead and read that for you. He was a skater boy. She said, "See you later, boy." He wasn't good enough for her. She had a pretty face, but her head was up in space. She needed to come back down to earth. 5 years from now, she sits at home, feeding the baby She's all alone. She turns on the TV. Guess who she sees? Skater boy walking up MTV. Thank you. The family's log cabin, while modest, was typical for frontier families of the time. Lincoln's early years in Kentucky were shaped by the wilderness, hard work, and the strong moral fiber of his parents, Thomas and Nancy Lincoln. And from an early age, young Abraham showcased an insatiable curiosity and a love for reading. Sarah, his elder sister, often remarked how he'd recite passages from the few books they had, including the Bible, under the flickering candlelight. A journal entry from a neighboring farmer, Josiah Crawford, provides a glimpse into young Lincoln's character. Marked April 15th, 1816. Met young Abe at the creek today. The boy, not more than 7, had a twinkle in his eyes. Said he'd found a book on geometry and had been reading it under a tree. Such thirst for knowledge in one so young. I did later discover the book on geometry had some weird pictures in it. There were many spherical shapes. My eyesight isn't what it once was, but I could have sworn one of those shapes looked just like my young wife's chest. My daughter Stacy said she tried to open the book once, but found it difficult to open, as if it were glued together. Oh well, he must be interested in spherical shapes for some reason and wants to keep it secret. I don't care. However, life in Kentucky was not without its hardships. Frontier life meant dealing with disease, unpredictable weather, and the ever-present threat of wildlife. Not only that, but Abraham would later cause quite the scandal after reading a poem he wrote out loud to a class. The poem he wrote has been preserved by the Library of Congress, and it said, Stacy's mom has got it going on. She's all I want, and I've waited for so long. Stacy, can't you see? You're just not the girl for me. I know it might be wrong. I'm in love with Stacy's mom. Stacy's mom. Stacy, can't you see? You're just not the girl for me. I know it might be wrong, but I'm in love with Stacy's mom. My God, I really wish that was a protected song that is preserved in the Library of Congress. I feel like that would make it one step away from essentially being the national anthem, which would be amazing. Could you imagine America's... Okay, whatever. Probably not that funny. Nah, it's hilarious. That was fucking hilarious. I love that. Anyways, by 1816, partly driven by the slavery issue that Thomas Lincoln disapproved of, and the desire for better farmland, the Lincolns decided to move to Indiana. It was here that Lincoln would spend much of his formative years. And the influence of Lincoln's Kentucky roots cannot be understated, though. The rugged landscape, combined with the moral teachings of his parents, instilled in him values of honesty, hard work, and perseverance. These principles would guide him throughout his life, from his early years as a lawyer to his presidency during one of the nation's most tumultuous periods. In retrospect, the modesty of Lincoln's beginnings in Hardin County stands as a testament to the limitless possibilities of the American dream. From such humble origins emerged a skater boy, rocking it out on MTV, who would go on to shape the destiny of a nation. As I referenced earlier, his upbringing, the values instilled in him, played a pivotal role in the decisions he made as president. And kind of going back here a little bit, a year before Abraham Lincoln's birth, another significant figure in American history took his first breaths in Fairview, Kentucky. That's right. Also from Kentucky, on June 3rd, 1808, Jefferson Davis was born. A man who would become the only president of the Confederate States of America during the tumultuous years of the American Civil War. Also, can you fucking imagine how chance that is that both of these boys were born in fucking Kentucky and both would go on to become leaders of the opposite sides of the nation during this time? Wild to me, and that's why we're doing this. Because they're so, like, they parallel, or they kind of skew, but they're also, like, parallel in a lot of ways, and I found it interesting, and hopefully you find it interesting, too, and don't think I'm some sort of, like, whack job conspiracy theorist. Anyways, the Davis family's roots in Kentucky were well established by the time of Jefferson's birth. His father, Samuel Davis, was a Revolutionary War veteran and had 10 children. That poor poor woman of his. My God, unless it was just with multiple girls. Which, yeah, I could see that. Anyways, with Jefferson being the youngest and therefore the most spoiled child, which is fitting for someone who would lead the Confederate States. I mean, obviously kidding. He wasn't any more spoiled than the rest of his siblings after the first son was born. That's how they did back then. You're the first son, you get everything. The Davis family lived on a modest cotton farm, and like many in the region, they relied heavily on the institution of slavery to manage their lands and sustain their way of life. That's one argument you will keep hearing repeated. It's the Southern way of life to have slaves. It's the Southern way of life to dream of strong, strapping young black men. The muscles pulling out weeds, and you get to stare at them as the sweat drips down off of the sweet, supple thighs. It's the Southern way of life, damn it. I will be able to stare at my supple, warm slaves. Yeah, so that was the main argument. This early exposure to the system of forced labor would deeply influence Jefferson Davis's worldview. Which, I mean, sure, if you grow up with owning slaves, it clearly makes it easier for you to accept because it's literally all you fucking know. Doesn't make it any more right, though. Just, it's still really fucking gross that you as a kid had to see that and then normalize it. Anyways, the neighbor of the Davis family, Eleanor Thompson, once noted in her journal, June 20th, 1815, young Jefferson came by today inquiring about a lost goat. There's a firmness in that boy, with an air of command. Said he's been reading about great leaders' history and wants to be one someday. Not only that, he keeps saying how he wants to make America as great as it was when Washington was president. He wants to make America great again. I'm sure his father has been filling his head with stories of the great general, but America has nowhere to go but up from there. It did not reach its peak greatness, and his father Sam needs to help him realize that. Definitely a MAGA conspirator. Fairview, Kentucky, with its rolling hills and fertile lands, and slaves being whipped to death, and the screams/cries of their children, provided a striking backdrop to Davis's early years in contrast to Lincoln's. His surroundings would echo the intense debates and conflicts over slavery and states' rights that would soon grip the nation. And by the age of 7, Jefferson's family moved to Mississippi, which further steeped him in the Southern way of life. As Davis grew, he pursued a military career, attending the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, serving with distinction in the Mexican-American War and holding various political offices, which we'll get into later. The dichotomy between Davis and Lincoln is striking. Born just 100 miles apart, and only a year's difference, their lives took markedly different paths. While Lincoln is remembered for his efforts to preserve the Union, Davis is often recalled for his determination to create a separate nation where the institution of slavery is protected. Because he fucking sucks. Anyways, in 1816, a significant shift occurred in the life of young Abraham Lincoln when his family decided to leave their Kentucky home. The move to Indiana was prompted by a combination of factors, notably the recurrent disputes over land titles in Kentucky. At the time, let me explain this. Kentucky's land title system was chaotic, with overlapping claims and speculative buying, essentially was happening all the time there, often leading to protracted legal battles, which... Let me explain that a little clearer. So essentially imagine if your neighbor and you were both right about each other's property lines, right? You know how your neighbor's always like, well, my property line is here. And then you're like, no, my property line is over there. And both of you would be right in this system, essentially. And you couldn't do shit because both of you own the same bit of land for some reason. Really, it's just the state fucking up. And your only real solution to this issue would be to stage a homicide/suicide of your neighbor and his family. You do this by creating a fake account with a picture of a hot woman and friending him on whatever social media account they use. And then you slowly start flirting with him more and more until eventually, after the second message that you send him, he sends a dick pic. It only takes 2. It's pretty easy, guys. And then you send that conversation to his wife, who is devastated at learning this. And you give them a couple weeks to fight, so that way their friends and family can learn about their troubles and know that they've been having issues at home. And then you sneak into their house, and you find out that the husband's already dead because the wife snapped. So it's as simple as asking her to, either run away or finish what she started. Then you leave and go immediately start building your fence you wanted to put up. And yeah, so Thomas Lincoln, Abraham's father, was one such unfortunate victim of this flawed system. And after investing time, labor, and resources into his Kentucky farm, he faced challenges to his land's ownership. And his neighbor flirted with him, pretending to be a hot woman, and I'm just kidding. Could you imagine? It all started back in 1816. That's when catfishing began. No, Thomas was determined to secure a better future for his family and was very frustrated by the uncertainty of land tenure in Kentucky. He could buy land but not really own it, and it fucking sucked. Thomas made the pivotal decision to relocate to Indiana. A diary entry from one of the Lincoln neighbors, Samuel Haynes, captures the sentiment at the time, October 5th, 1816. Thomas Lincoln came by today, said he's moving his family to Indiana. Tired of the land title mess here, says Indiana's got clearer laws and richer soil. Hate to see him go. Young Abe's got a sharp mind, always asking questions about everything. The journey to Indiana was fraught with challenges. The family had to navigate dense forests, cross rivers, and set up a new homestead in unfamiliar territory. But the Lincolns were resilient. They initially lived in a temporary shelter, which they called a half-faced camp, before constructing a more permanent log cabin. Indiana was a free state, and while the slavery issue was one of the factors driving the Lincolns out of Kentucky, it wasn't the primary one. That definitely needs to be noted. They didn't give that much of a shit about slavery. Maybe like a little bit. They just kind of thought it was wrong. But back then, white people thought slavery was wrong in the same way that I think it's wrong for you to... actually, I feel like a better comparison. I was going to say like, slurp your soup. But honestly, a better comparison to this is the debate over how your children should be punished today. So you know how like some people are like, hey, there should be no spanking. You shouldn't, hit or anything. And some other people are like, oh no, that's how I grew up. And that's how everyone else is going to grow up. And, you feel morally wrong about when you hear about people spanking their kids sometimes. Not even really, like for me, I don't feel necessarily morally wrong. I think spanking, when done properly, not done just liberally, is sometimes the correct punishment needed for your kids. Sometimes, not all the time. And kids are different too. So it's kind of like a, family to family situation, which is how a lot of people back then really viewed slavery. They're like, that's like a state to state situation. It doesn't affect me because I'm not the one being enslaved. And that's essentially how white people viewed it. So anyways, Lincoln's family is one of those families where they're like, yeah, morally, I don't feel great about it, but I don't fucking care. It's not hurting my life. I've got other things to worry about. Still, the move further distanced Abraham from the institution of slavery, though, which would reinforce the views he'd later champion as president. So in Indiana, Abraham grew from a young boy into a young man, his character molded by the trials and tribulations of frontier life. I don't know why I did that voice, but I did. It was here that he faced personal tragedies, including the death of his mother, Nancy, in 1818, which we'll get into. We'll get into a little bit. We just need to go over Davis's family a little bit because they also move, but deeper into the South. Again, parallel, but then like they diverge. Crazy. It's cool. Great. So in 1817, a year after the Lincoln family moved to Indiana, the Davis family, too, embarked on a journey to start anew, seeking the promise of greater opportunities and the allure of the burgeoning South. Samuel Davis decided to move his family from Fairview, Kentucky, to the fertile lands of Mississippi. Oh, Mississippi Queen. This relocation would play a significant role in shaping the life and beliefs of young Jefferson Davis. The move to Mississippi came at an opportune time. The region was witnessing a boom driven by the cotton economy. Rich, arable land combined with the cruel institution of slavery enabled large-scale cotton cultivation, making it a magnet for settlers looking for economic prosperity. The Davis family was no exception, with aspirations to make a mark in this new land of opportunity. Opportunity for white people. That's what it was a land for. An excerpt from a letter penned by a local merchant, Nathaniel Green, offers a glimpse into the times. July 9th, 1817. Met with Samuel Davis today, fresh from Kentucky. Plans to buy a plot of land, a plot near Woodville. Says the land is rich, ripe for cotton. There's a fire in his eyes, a hunger to succeed in this new southern frontier. Mississippi was vastly different from Kentucky in terms of its socioeconomic landscape. The state was rapidly becoming a stronghold of the planter elite, a society deeply entrenched in the values and practices of the antebellum South. The antebellum! For young Jefferson Davis, this move meant immersion in a culture where slavery wasn't just an economic necessity, but a way of life. Growing up in Mississippi, Jefferson was exposed to the daily operations of a cotton plantation and the hierarchical societal structures of the South. This environment undoubtedly shaped his understanding of race, labor, and economics. As Davis matured, he embraced the Southern way of life, adopting its customs, values, and most importantly, its staunch defense of states' rights and the institution of slavery based off of Genesis chapter 9, verses 20 through 27, where Noah gets naked, drunk, and gets pissed off that his kids wouldn't appreciate his meat. The dumbest fucking reason for slavery. So stupid. I can't believe they took that literally. Everywhere else, Jesus is like, and God is like, everyone's equal in my eyes, really. You're all fucking sinners before me. And they're like, but we're white though. Essentially is what they, oh God. You know, it would have made a little more sense. And it still wouldn't make it justifiable. But if they would have at least gone to like Palestine and tried conquering them. But oh wait, that would have been too hard because they were also technologically advanced and harder to capture and to force into slavery. Oh, so we got to go do it to the other people who weren't as advanced and like we could capture and like force into slavery. Fucking assholes. Anyways, I will say though, he was more of a supporter, like Davis was. Jeff Davis was more of a supporter of states' rights to self-govern as opposed to just wanting to keep slavery. He had that anti-federalist mindset that essentially most Republicans share now. Davis's education and experiences in Mississippi were vastly different from Lincoln's in Indiana. While Lincoln was shaped by the free soil ethos of the Midwest, encountering the challenges and liberties of frontier life, Davis was nurtured in the heart of the slaveholding South, surrounded by its affluence and complexities. As I referenced earlier, regarding both Lincoln and Davis's relocations, the circumstances and environments of their youth significantly influenced their later lives. For Davis, Mississippi provided the foundation upon which he built his convictions. Convictions that would lead him to helm the Confederacy during the nation's greatest crisis. And then in 1828, it's a sad year. The year 1828 marked a somber turning point in Abraham Lincoln's life. At just 9 years old, Lincoln faced one of the most devastating experiences a child can endure: the death of his mother. Nancy Hanks Lincoln. This profound loss would leave an indelible mark on the future president, influencing his character, beliefs, and leadership style. Nancy Hanks Lincoln was a pivotal figure in young Abraham's life, often described as a woman of intelligence, kindness, and deep religious faith. She instilled in her son a love of learning, the importance of honesty, and a strong moral compass. Their bond was undeniable, with Lincoln often sitting by her side, listening intently to the stories and lessons she shared. He was a mama's boy, and Abe in most of his speeches would actually begin at first by saying, my mama said, but that was redacted. That would be redacted later on by the government to make it seem like their favorite president was less of a little mama's boy, baby boy bitch. And it wasn't until Adam Sandler spoke out against the neo-Nazi space lizards with his movie Waterboy that anyone began to realize the truth that the government was hiding, and that was that William motherfucking Bradford had been in control of the U.S. this entire time. O magne eversor scrubis suvit tacitrum curious satiras ac proclamarum ut effundat effundat. Tragedy struck the Lincoln household when Nancy contracted a disease known as milk sickness. The ailment was caused by drinking milk from cows that had gazed on white snake root, a toxic plant within a Within a short time, her health deteriorated rapidly. She passed away, leaving the family heartbroken. At least that's what William Bradford wants you to think. Milk sickness? Yeah, right. We all know you filled her with your evil space vampire demon seed. Bradford, you sick fuck. This is what would begin Abraham Lincoln's journey into becoming a vampire hunter. That's right. 3 fucking episodes of Space Vampire Bradford for this to pay off into an Abe Lincoln vampire hunter joke. Do you feel bamboozled yet? Anyways, her death was like super sad and shit for Abe. A poignant entry from a neighbor's journal, Martha Elkins, captures the grief of the moment. October 6th, 1828. The Lincoln boy Abraham looks devastated. His mother's passing has cast a deep shadow over their home. Saw him by her grave today, lost in thought. Such sorrow in those young eyes. So maybe my whole Bradford bit was in poor taste, especially since I can actually empathize with the feeling of losing a parent. I could empathize, or I could do this. Woke up today with the sun shining bright. Heard the news and it felt so right. Life's thrown a curve, a brand new start. A journey of love, straight from the heart. Getting a new mom, the world's full of glee. Together we'll be a brand new family. Laughter and joys, adventures we'll see. With our hearts combined, how great life will be. Maybe she bakes or dances or sings or tells funny tales of faraway kings. Learning her ways, sharing dreams and fun. Embracing the change, life's race has begun. 2 different stories now merging as one. With love as the guide, our new life's begun. Every challenge, every smile, every tear. With a new mom by my side, I've nothing to fear. Getting a new mom, the skies are so blue. Together we'll face each challenge anew. Laughter and joy, the stories we'll weave. With a love in our hearts, in ourselves we believe. New memories to make and old ones to share. Through ups and downs with a perfect pair. From morning hugs to bedtime's lullaby. With her, every moment feels like I can fly. Getting a new mom, a wonderful spree. Building our joy, there's her and me. Laughter and joy to the future we steer. With every new day, our bond grows more dear. So here's to the future, bright and carefree. With a new mom, how splendid life will be. He's getting a new mom. Get it, Abe. Get yourself a new mom. Woo! Get a new mom. Double Christmas. Woo! Enjoy that new mom. His mom is dead and I'm making fun of it. The impact of this loss on Lincoln was profound. He became more introspective, finding solace in books and nature. It's believed that his mother's death fueled his empathetic nature, allowing him to deeply connect with the suffering and grief of others. Oh, and I totally made a really fun song about that. So, as he grew older, Lincoln often spoke of the profound influence his mother had on him, famously stating, "All that I am or hope to be, I owe to my angel mother." After Nancy's death, fuck, I shouldn't be laughing. It's so fucked. After Nancy's death, the Lincoln household faced challenging times. Recognizing the need for a maternal figure in the lives of his children, Thomas Lincoln remarried a year later to Sarah Bush Johnston, a widow with 3 children of her own. Sarah, or Sally, as she was often called, stepped into the role with grace and compassion, quickly forging a strong bond with Abraham and shaping his later years in Indiana. All right, moving back to the Jefferson household. So in 1824, as America was undergoing significant political and social shifts, Jefferson Davis, at the age of 16, took a monumental step in his personal journey by enrolling at Transylvania University in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm not continuing a vampire joke here. He really did study there. I do realize now that maybe I need to cool it a little with the fake outs. The decision marked the beginning of his formal education, a phase that would mold his intellect, broaden his horizons, and lay the foundation for his future political and military pursuits. Transylvania University, which was established in 1780, was one of the premier institutions in the West during the early 19th century. With a curriculum that emphasized classical studies, law, and medicine, the university attracted the brightest minds of the South, because most of them were vampires. And that's just what a lot of Southerners were. So for young Davis, who had already displayed a penchant for leadership and scholarship, Transylvania offered an environment to nurture these inclinations. I know from one of Davis's contemporaries, Henry Clay Jr., paints a picture of the young scholar. March 3rd, 1825. Debated with Jefferson today. His arguments, well-structured and impassioned. He speaks with conviction, defended states' rights with fervor. One can see that he's destined for the political arena. During his time at Transylvania, Davis was exposed to diverse ideologies and engaged in rigorous intellectual debates. I'm really not fucking with you guys. Like it is called Transylvania University. Oh, do good. The university's location in Lexington, often termed the Athens of the West, provided Davis with a vibrant cultural and political milieu. He studied under distinguished faculty members, including the eminent law professor George Robertson. This period honed Davis's analytical skills, deepened his understanding of the American political system, and solidified his commitment to the Southern cause. However, Davis's stint at Transylvania was relatively short-lived. By 1828, influenced by his older brother Joseph, who recognized Jefferson's potential for a military career, he secured a nomination to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. That's right, the West Point, the one where all of those assholes go. I'm kidding. I mean, most of the assholes go to there. But we need assholes who are good at war, and, that's where they go to train. This transition from a classical education in Kentucky to a military one in New York further diversified Davis's experiences, preparing him for the multifaceted roles he would undertake in the coming years. And then we go to 1828. So 1828 heralded a transformative era in American politics with the election of Andrew motherfucking Jackson as the 7th president of the United States. His ascension to the presidency not only marked a distinct shift in the political landscape, but also the solidification of the Democratic Party as a dominant force in American politics. Andrew Jackson, with his fiery spirit and populist appeal, represented a departure from the previous presidents, most of whom hailed from the Virginia or Massachusetts elite. Like the time William Bradford, in the guise of Thomas Jefferson, won the presidency. And after starting the first ever mudslinging campaign, he was from the Massachusetts elite. Oh, man. That won't ever stop, by the way. I'm going to keep doing that. So, anyways, born in the Carolinas and having made his name at the frontier, Jackson was perceived by many as the embodiment of the common man. His rise to power was seen as a victory for the average American against the established political aristocracy. A diary entry from a Philadelphia merchant, Elijah Whitman, encapsulates the mood of the times. December 12th, 1828. The city is abuzz with Jackson's impending inauguration. Some hail it as a triumph of the common folk, while others feel he'll be a tyrant. These are interesting times indeed. Jackson's presidency brought about the rise of the spoils system, where political loyalty was rewarded with public office positions. This practice both centralized his power and entrenched the Democratic Party's influence. His tenure was also marked by his staunch opposition to the National Bank. Fuck the bank. Leading to its eventual dismantling, and the controversial and tragic policy of Native American removal, culminating in the infamous Trail of Tears. Jackson was a man who really enjoyed beating a dead horse, which was really what he did there. He also enjoyed beating off multiple dead horses, and said that horse cum felt good on his skin as it made him feel more alive than filthy Spaniard blood that he used as lotion previously. I guess there's just something about horse cum. The 1828 election also solidified the Democratic Party's identity. Emerging from the Democratic-Republican Party, the New Democrats under Jackson championed states' rights, which was a strict interpretation of the Constitution, and an aversion to a strong federal government, especially in economic affairs. However, Jackson's strong-willed leadership style and populist policies also fostered opposition. Oh, dear Lord, why am I yawning so much? Sorry, guys. Leading to the strengthening of another political entity, the Whig Party. This party formed in opposition to what they saw as Jackson's kingly tendencies. Some of those tendencies being fucking your wives, fucking your daughters, and doing whatever the fuck you wanted. This is essentially what Jackson did. So they would play a pivotal role in American politics for the next few decades. As I continue on with this, I do want to let people know that I don't like Andrew Jackson. I don't think he was that good of a president. I think he just came in, stirred up a bunch of shit, and fucked over the country for a little bit. So that's all I think he did, in case anyone was wondering. Anyway, in 1830, the restless winds of change blew again for the Lincoln family, seeking better prospects. Oh my god! Ugh. Okay, I need to figure out something about this yawn. But yawn one more time, I'm gonna beat the shit out of myself. So get ready for that, viewers. Get ready to hear someone just like beating the crap out of themselves. Anyways, they embarked on another relocation, this time from Indiana to Illinois. For young Abraham Lincoln, now 21 years old, this move signaled a departure from the confines of family life and the start of his journey into the broader world. Illinois, the prairie state, was fast emerging as a land of opportunity. Its fertile soil beckoned farmers, while its strategic location promised growth in trade and commerce. For the Lincoln family, the move was driven by a combination of deteriorating soil conditions in Indiana and the promise of a fresh start in the burgeoning state. Mostly, just Thomas couldn't, get his shit together, and he also just kind of got fucked over quite a bit, so. A journal entry from one of their Illinois neighbors. Okay. From one of their Illinois neighbors, Josiah Crawford, captures the Lincoln family's early days in the new territory. May 15th, 1830. Met the Lincoln family today, newcomers from Indiana. Young Abraham is a tall, wiry fellow, strong as an ox. Says he's keen on working and is good with an axe. Might hire him to help clear some timber. In Illinois, Abraham's reputation as a hard worker was quickly spread. He took up various jobs from rail splitting to farm labor, earning the nickname Rail Splitter. These years of manual labor instilled in him a strong work ethic and an understanding of challenges faced by the common man. It was also during this period that he began to nurture his oratory skills, engaging in debates and discussions at local gatherings. Not only that, but while there, he began his training in vampire hunting. It was there he learned about his mother's true killer, William Bradford, and how he had secretly been ruling Massachusetts for the past almost 200 years. It was here he also gained his second nickname by the natives, and that was Horsecock. It was said that he could split an ass open with a single thrust of his mighty penis. So again, I'm trying to give you guys, when I say something that's clearly not true, another very absurd thing that shouldn't be true. So hopefully that's enough of a hint for you sometimes if I, don't happen to say. Clearly he didn't get fucking called Horsecock from the natives, but that would have been cool. Anyways, while working as a laborer, Lincoln also realized the importance of education and advancing his prospects. He borrowed books whenever he could, often walking miles to return them. His thirst for knowledge was evident. And despite the sporadic nature of his formal schooling, Lincoln's self-education laid the foundation for his future endeavors in law and politics. And by 1834, Abraham's efforts bore fruit when he was elected to Illinois state legislator as a member of the Whig Party. It was a very remarkable achievement for someone who had spent the preceding years engaged in manual labor, a testament to his determination and skater boy-esque level of coolness, because he was a skater boy. And she had said, "See you later, boy." Back it up a bit before we get into Lincoln's elections. 1831 is Jefferson Davis's time at West Point. So this venerable institution that was established in 1802 was the crucible where many of America's future military leaders were molded. For Davis, his time at West Point would lay the groundwork for his subsequent military and political careers. My God. Embedding in him a deep sense of discipline, honor, and commitment to the Southern cause. He had that Southern cause where he was like, I gotta feel them strong, rippling slave muscles. My God. Anyway, sorry. West Point was more than just a military academy. It was an environment of rigorous and intellectual and physical challenges. Cadets were not only trained in the art of warfare, but also in engineering, mathematics, and philosophy. This holistic education was aimed at producing well-rounded officers capable of serving the nation both on and off the battlefield. An excerpt from a letter written by... Oh my God, no! One of Davis's fellow cadets, Alfred Cumming, offers a glimpse into Davis's life at the academy. August 14th, 1832. Jefferson is an exemplary cadet. While he occasionally bristles against strict regulations, his commitment to duty is unwavering. Our debates on states' rights and federal authority are becoming the stuff of legends in our barracks. During his time at West Point, Davis showcased both his intellectual prowess and his firm belief in states' rights. These beliefs would form the core of his political ideology in the years to come. However, his years at the academy weren't without the challenges. Davis, like many of his peers, grappled with the rigorous discipline and faced his fair share of demerits for minor infractions. One of those being where he straight up bought a fuck ton of booze into his cabin. I'm talking like a fuck ton of booze, and he got in trouble for that. He was a bit of a partier. Sad to say that, such an asshole is also someone who likes to party, but many are. So, okay. Anyways, back to 1834. So, his election to Abraham Lincoln's election to Illinois' state legislator signaled the beginning of his deep engagement with the public service and the realm of policymaking. Representing the Whig Party, Lincoln's political beliefs resonated with the party's core principles, emphasizing economic development, infrastructure, and a balanced power structure between the executive and legislative branches. The Whig Party stood in opposition to what they perceived as the kingly tendencies of Andrew Jackson and his Democratic Party. Again, Jackson just liked fucking people's wives. And, that's a big problem. He might have even fucked Lincoln's fiancée to death, who died, or she was killed by a vampire. Who knows? One of the two. Anyways, the Whigs believed in the power of a centralized government to drive internal improvements, and Lincoln, with his firsthand experience of the challenges on the American frontier, deeply understood the need for better infrastructure and transportation networks. He realized that if states were left to design everything on their own, the highway system for traveling and shit was going to get real fucking messy. I mean, could you imagine if every state was able to decide how their road and speed limits would work? Yeah, it'd be fucking awful, right? Not like we live in those times. And the legislator, like Lincoln, became known for his eloquence and ability to dissect complex issues with clarity. His speeches, often infused with humor and anecdotes from his own experiences, resonated with both his colleagues and the general populace. An entry from a fellow legislator's journal provides insight into Lincoln's reputation. September 7th, 1834. Heard Lincoln speak today on the need for improved canals. His mastery over words and genuine passion he exudes is truly captivating. He possesses an uncanny ability to bridge divides and find common ground. I'm just assuming the guy spoke like that. So the dude was hilarious, probably because he was so depressed. They had to use his humor to keep himself happy. And man, that's really sad, but it's true, unfortunately. Abe was known to suffer from frequent bouts of depression, and one of his ways of combating it was humor. Man would have been a great comedian in today's time. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it was not all that funny, and people just laughed because, he was like tall and shit. When someone's tall, it's just easier to respect them. Anyways, Lincoln's advocacy wasn't limited to infrastructure alone. He took a keen interest in various societal issues, including education. Believing that an informed citizenry was crucial for the health of a democracy. He supported measures to improve the state's education system. As a Whig, Lincoln often found himself debating and contesting policies proposed by the Democrats. His logical and measured approach to debates, combined with his knack for storytelling, made him a formidable opponent. Over time, his consistent stance on issues and his unwavering commitment to the principles he believed in earned him respect, even from his adversaries. Outside of legislative halls, Lincoln recognized the importance of legal acumen for a politician. During this period, he started studying law more seriously, often poring over law books late into the night. And this self-directed study, driven by Lincoln's insatiable thirst for knowledge, would eventually lead to his admission to the bar, setting the stage for his subsequent career as a lawyer. And then in 1835, this slave-owning motherfucker Jefferson Davis finally has something bad happen to him. So, the year 1835 delivered a heartbreaking blow to Jefferson Davis. Just a few years after graduating from West Point and embarking on a promising military career, he experienced a personal tragedy that would leave a scar on his life. He married Sarah Knox Taylor, the daughter of his commanding officer and future U.S. President Zachary Taylor. It seemed like the beginning of a blissful chapter for Davis. However, fate had other plans. Sarah and Jefferson's courtship blossomed during Davis's military assignments. Despite reservations from her father, who feared the hardships of a military spouse's life and the fact that Davis always seemed to stare at young slaves on the plantation, specifically young male slaves, who around the age of 20 to 25, who were ripped, and was convinced that Davis was gay, the young couple seemed to be deeply in love and determined to forge a life together, so he allowed it. Against these odds, they married in June 1835, eager to start their new life, and they decided to spend the summer at Davis's sister's plantation in Louisiana, envisioning a period of marital bliss. However, tragedy struck swiftly. A journal entry from a close family friend, Eliza Johnson, captures the poignancy of the moment. September 16th, 1835. The air is thick with grief. Poor Jefferson is inconsolable. To think that just a few months ago they were celebrating their union, now Sarah has been taken by the fever. The cruelty of fate is beyond comprehension. That was a shitty accent there, but deal with it. Malaria, prevalent in the Mississippi River region, claimed Sarah's life. Only 3 months after their wedding. The abruptness of this loss devastated Davis. He was plunged into a deep melancholy, grappling with the harshness of a future suddenly devoid of the companion he had just pledged his life to. But was it malaria that killed Sarah? Or was it William Bradford, space vampire extraordinaire, under the guise of Abraham Lincoln? And did Jeffy Davis also learn of this later and begin to train himself in the vampire slaying arts? America's true secret history must be uncovered. In the aftermath, Davis's life underwent a profound transformation. He resigned from the military and retreated from the public life for a time, clearly studying to become a vampire hunter. No, he was seeking solace in study and introspection. It's believed that this period of grief and reflection deeply influenced his perspectives, molding the character he would later exhibit in his political career. Okay. Then in 1842, something good happens to Lincoln finally. So, yay. This heralded a new chapter in Abraham Lincoln's life, as he tied the knot with Mary Todd, a vivacious and well-educated woman from a prominent Kentucky family. Their relationship, while passionate, was not without its challenges. The couple's courtship was filled with ups and downs, including a brief breakup and reconciliation, which only strengthened their bond in the end. Mary Todd hailed from a wealthy and politically influential family, bringing with her a rich tapestry of experiences and connections that would play a crucial role in Lincoln's ascension in politics. While she was attracted to Lincoln's intellect and wit, he was drawn to her energy, political acumen, and the refinement she brought into his life. Again, this still reminds me of still more lyrics from the poet A. Levine. He was a skater boy. She said, "See you later, boy." He wasn't good enough for her. Now he's a superstar. Simon on his guitar. Does your pretty face see what he's worth? Sorry, girl, but you missed out. Well, tough. Luck that boy's mine now. We are more than just good friends. This is how the story ends. Too bad that you couldn't see the man that boy could be. There's more that meets the eye. I see the soul that's inside. And that's exactly what fucking Mary did. She saw the soul that was inside that skater boy, Abe Lincoln. Oh, man. I like to imagine Abe just fucking grinding on rails or something. Or just like, just going on the half pipe, going on the pipe a little bit and just, doing some cool tricks and shit. Shredding out there. Anyways, a letter from a close friend of Mary, Cassandra Good, dated December 5th, 1842, offers insight into the early days of their marriage. Mary speaks highly of her Abe. Their home is filled with laughter, and she seems truly content. She often mentions his tales from the frontier and how they spend evenings discussing politics and society. Their union seems to be one of both love and mutual respect, unlike my marriage, where my man's a bitch. Honestly, the more I read up on Abe, the better he sounds as a person. Nearly every person in his life had something good to say about this man. He is, for sure, in my top 3 dead people I'd love to talk to. Anyways, over the years, their family grew. The couple became parents to 4 sons, Robert, and then Edward, who was nicknamed Eddie, and then William, who's nicknamed Willie, and then Thomas, who's nicknamed Tad. And I assume Robert wasn't given a nickname because he was an asshole or something. That or saying Rob as a nickname might have been seen as rude back then. I don't know. Each child brought joy and challenges, adding layers to the Lincoln family narrative. Eddie, sadly, died just a few days shy of his 4th birthday. A loss that deeply affected both parents, which, my God, Abe cannot catch a break. Poor guy loses his mom, then gains another. Will lose his father here in a little bit, and then loses his little boy. No wonder this man was fucking depressed. But still, we do have to ask ourselves, did Eddie really die of tuberculosis like the so-called history books would tell you? Or was Abe getting close to the truth? And so William Bradford, space vampire, had to send him a warning saying, "Oh, your mother wasn't enough of a warning, huh, you little bitch? Well, what about your kid then?" Then Abe would train even hunted to slay vampire. Oh, man. I don't know why it cracks me up so much, but it does. I'm just smiling a lot right now. If you're listening and not watching, just smiling because of it. Despite the demands of family life, the Lincolns often found themselves at the epicenter of political discussions, especially as the nation grappled with issues leading up to the Civil War. Mary's Southern background and her unionist leanings, combined with Lincoln's firm stance against the expansion of slavery, made their household a microcosm of the broader national tensions. Their marriage wasn't without strains. Both faced personal demons, Lincoln with his bouts of melancholy, and Mary with her own emotional struggles, exacerbated by the stresses of public life and personal losses. Yet through the tumult of their personal and public lives, their partnership remained resilient. Mary was not just a wife, but also a confidant and an advisor to Lincoln, especially during his presidency. Okay, and then by 1845, Jefferson Davis had undergone a significant evolution in both his personal and professional life. Having experienced the profound sorrow of losing his first wife and then finding love again with Verena Howell, Davis was slowly emerging from a self-imposed retreat from public life. His election to the U.S. House of Representatives that year as a Democrat signified his re-entry into the political arena. He was ready to go. Got some new pussy and he was like, yeah, man, I can do it. I can do it. or something like that. He has a dire injury from Henry Stewart, who was a contemporary of Davis, and the House reads from May 8th, says, attended a committee meeting today where Davis spoke eloquently about the need for stronger state autonomy. His convictions are strong, and while I may not agree with all of his positions, there's no denying his dedication to the beliefs and his ability to present them convincingly. Davis's time in the House was marked by his advocacy for the Southern way of life, which was intrinsically tied to slavery. He was also a strong proponent of infrastructure development and modernization, echoing the principles of the Democratic Party. Moreover, the annexation of Texas and the resultant tensions with Mexico, leading up to the Mexican-American War, became pivotal issues during his tenure. Interestingly, while Davis was a passionate defender of states' rights, he also believed in a strong and unified nation, a dichotomy that would define much of his political career. He saw the United States as a great power in the making and believed that internal cohesion and external expansion were key to realizing this vision. That's right. The guy who, became the leader of the Confederates, the people who seceded from the Union, actually wanted them to not do that. Very surprising, I know. But because because of how staunch of belief he was in states' rights to be able to self-govern first, he stepped down with the state when they decided to secede with the Union. It was kind of crazy. So, year 1846, after he's elected, marked the beginning of the Mexican-American War, a conflict that would have lasting ramifications on the territorial, political, and societal fabric of the United States. With this larger narrative, the roles played by Jefferson Davis and Abraham Lincoln present an intriguing juxtaposition. Jefferson Davis, ever the soldier at heart, re-entered military service as a colonel of the Mississippi Rifles. Under his leadership, the regiment played a significant role in the Battle of Buena Vista, where Davis demonstrated tactical brilliance and personal bravery, leading a charge and repelling a larger Mexican force. Davis's actions on the battlefield made him a national hero in the eyes of many Americans. A correspondent for the Mobile Register reported on February 27, 1847, Colonel Davis's defense was nothing short of miraculous. His leadership and valor of the Mississippi Rifles turned the tide at Buena Vista. They've made the South proud. Some proud boys right there. Miraculous seeming, though, because by this point in time, Jeffy Davy had become a full-fledged vampire hunter. That's the only reason why it was miraculous looking. He was training that hard by monks. All right, sorry guys. I just want history to be more magical and fantastical. Okay, stop groaning and just buckle up because there's gonna be more of it. Conversely, Abraham Lincoln, then serving in the U.S. House of Representatives, took a critical stance on the war. Skeptical of President James K. Polk's motivations for instigating the conflict, Lincoln introduced the spot resolutions, demanding clarity on the exact spot where Mexican forces allegedly attacked American troops, which was used as a pretext to declare war, essentially calling out Polk for bullshit. He was like, I know you're just saying this so that way you have justification for war. So what was the exact spot then? Where exactly did they strike at us? Because, was that our territory? It probably wasn't. I know you're lying. Lincoln's opposition wasn't just based on procedural grounds. He genuinely believed that the war was an attempt to expand the territory conducive to slavery, which was probably true. So in a speech delivered to the House in 1848, Lincoln said, "The president unnecessarily and unconstitutionally commenced a war with Mexico. The blood of this war, like the blood of Abel, is crying to heaven against him." This sentiment, while reflective of Lincoln's moral and political stance, wasn't universally popular, especially among fervently patriotic sections of the populace. Basically, everyone back then was all for beating up people that have already had the shit kicked out of them for hundreds of years. Because, fuck them. Abe's more humanitarian approach basically made them feel bad for thinking that way, and they didn't like feeling bad about the way they were thinking. You made them so sad. They were so sad about it. The Mexican-American War intensified the already simmering national debate over slavery. With the acquisition of vast territories from Mexico, the question arose, would these new territories be slave or free? This debate would lay the groundwork for the Compromise of 1850 and ultimately the Civil War. So anyways, let's go ahead and get into the Compromise of 1850 then. The Compromise of 1850 stands out as one of the most pivotal legislative packages in American history, crafted as a set of laws meant to diffuse a political confrontation between slave and free states following the Mexican-American War. It had the dual effect of temporarily postponing the Civil War while intensifying the very tensions it sought to, get rid of and shit. But it didn't do that. It was sort of like getting a restraining order against against an abusive ex, which, it might delay the violence for a second, but in your heart, you're going to have to buy a gun and be ready to defend yourself because that ex will try something eventually, especially now that they have been openly called out for their bullshit. So get ready. That's what everyone essentially did here. Central to the compromise was Senator Henry Clay, often called the Great Compromiser, who introduced the package. The main provisions of the compromise were, number one, an admission of California as a free state. Number two, territorial divisions of the remainder of the Mexican secession into New Mexico and Utah, where the decision to allow slavery would be determined by popular sovereignty. Number three, the resolution of Texas-New Mexico boundary disputes in favor of New Mexico. And number four, the federal government assuming Texas's debt. Number five, the abolition of the slave trade, but not slavery itself in the District of Columbia. And then number six, so in Washington, D.C., the controversial Fugitive Slave Act, which mandated that escaped slaves be returned to their owners, even if they were found in a free state, which is so fucked. I mean, even more fucked up would be comparing it to a game of tag, which is what I'm about to do. So essentially, imagine you're in a game of tag and there's a free zone that you can run to if you get caught. But you have some buddies or Southerners who don't like playing that way. So they said, yeah, you don't get to be in the free zone and be free still. I still get to tag you. And then they left them with no other choice but to kill them. So, that's what they did. It was a really fucked up game of tag there. A letter dated September 20th, 1850 from Eliza Hamilton, resident of Massachusetts, gives a first-hand account. Fugitive Slave Act has cast a dark cloud over our town. There's talk everywhere, at the market, in the church, and in our homes. The idea that we could be compelled by law to send a runaway slave back to their life of bondage is deeply unsettling. Many are saying they defy such an order. The Fugitive Slave Act was the most contentious part of the compromise. For Southerners, it was the necessary measure to protect what they deemed their property rights and maintain social order, which is a fucking gross way of thinking. However, in the North, it was seen by many as a stark violation of personal liberties, which it was. The act compelled citizens to assist in the capture of runaway slaves and denied those slaves any legal rights, such as the right to a trial. Those who assisted runaways could be fined or imprisoned, further fanning the flames of abolitionist sentiment in the North. The Compromise of 1850 did achieve its immediate goal. It temporarily eased sectional tensions and delayed the outbreak of hostilities between the North and South. But the concessions made, especially the Fugitive Slave Act, inflamed passions on both sides, causing many who were previously ambivalent about slavery to take a more definitive stance. And then in 1851, after all that shit went down, we have the death of Thomas Lincoln. And the relationship between Abe and his father, Thomas, was complex and deeply influential in shaping the future president's character and worldview. Thomas, often remembered as a hardworking but iterant farmer, was instrumental in Abraham's early life, though their relationship grew strained as Abraham matured and sought to carve out his own path. Thomas Lincoln passed away January 17, 1851, in Coles County, Illinois. His death marked the end of an era for Abraham, making him a full orphan and basically allowing him to be Batman at this point. He got to be Batman. No, it was a close chapter of familial ties, memories, and emotional complexities. An excerpt from a letter penned by Abraham Lincoln in the aftermath of his father's death provides insight into the relationship. Addressed to his stepbrother, John D. Johnston, dated January 12, 1851, Lincoln wrote, Say to mother that I have been in deep pain to hear of father's sickness, and would have come to see him were it not for the constant press of business here. I sincerely hope father may recover yet. My heart is with all at home. While this letter showcases Lincoln's concern, it's notable that he did not visit his ailing father or attend the funeral, suggesting the distance, both emotional and physical, that had grown between them. Could also be he just didn't want to go to the funeral because, he was already dealing with depression. It just probably would have fucked him up more. So in the early years, Thomas taught Abraham virtues of hard work, honesty, and perseverance. While not formally educated, Thomas was deeply religious and imparted a moral framework to his son. However, as Abraham grew older, their differences became more pronounced. Abraham's thirst for knowledge and ambition for a life beyond manual labor stood in contrast to his father's more traditional values and expectations. His father didn't want him in politics, thought it was kind of against God, essentially. And Abe was like, fuck you, Dad. Fuck you. And then Thomas was like, well, fuck you, son. Fuck you. And it caused a bunch of problems. So Josiah Crawford, who was a friend and neighbor of the Lincoln family during Abraham's youth, captures the dynamics of their relationship. In 1851, he wrote, It's a sorrowful time with Tom's passing. I recall Abe and Tom's disagreements back in the day. Abe always had his head in the books, and Tom just couldn't understand it. They had their differences, but blood's thicker than water. It's kind of like when you're really into D&D and your kids are more into sports or vice versa. And you love them and shit, but you'll never connect as much as you'd like to, since your interests are just too different despite you trying to compromise and find common ground. I don't know. It's tricky. It's tricky when your kids have different hobbies than you do. And you just gotta try and do your best to, relate to them still. I'm not there yet with my kids. I will be one day, though, and I'll have to navigate that. So, though their relationship was marked by misunderstandings and distance, Thomas's influence on Abraham cannot be understated at all. Really, this guy was a hard fucking worker, and his values of that and honesty, integrity were very ingrained into Abraham, and it's very much known as trademarks of who Abraham Lincoln was. Were those values that Thomas instilled in him. So definitely had a huge impact on him. Okay, and then in 1853, Davis is appointed to the U.S. Secretary of War under President Franklin Pierce. Yeah, lots of presidents going on here. I'm not going to go through every single one of them because, yes, a few of them may have caused more rifts than intended, but we're going through the lives of Abraham and Jeffrey Davy. Okay? Davis assumed the role at a time when the nation's territorial expansion and evolving military needs demanded a capable and forward-thinking leader. He was well suited for the job, given his West Point education and military experience from the Mexican-American War, and his tenure in the U.S. Senate. One of the signature achievements during Davis's tenure was his advocacy for the adoption of the camel for military purposes in the American Southwest, believing that camels would be useful for transportation in the arid regions of the country. He initiated the Camel Corps experiment, though the idea eventually fell out of favor, mostly due to technology. It showcased Davis's willingness to innovate. And, good for him. Great for him. A letter from Major Henry Wayne, goddamn, tasked with procuring the camels, dated April 15th, 1856, reads, Secretary Davis's vision of employing these beasts for the desert terrain is intriguing. Their stamina and ability to carry heavy loads over long distances with minimal water might just revolutionize our operations in the Southwest. Davis was also instrumental in overseeing various infrastructural projects. He championed the construction and expansion of federal routes and railroads, bridging the vast American landscape. Furthermore, Davis implemented reforms at military installations, enhancing their defensive capabilities and modernizing their design. The forts constructed or revamped under his watch were pivotal later in the Civil War. Yeah, and his tenure definitely wasn't without controversy, though. As a Southern Democrat and a staunch believer in states' rights, Davis's policies often reflected his pro-slavery stance. As the country edged closer to the precipice of civil conflict, his role as the Secretary of War placed him at the heart of many, many sectional debates over military resources and strategic locations. It was also during his time that he succumbed to the influence of William Bradford and gasp had allowed himself to become a vampire due to the consuming grief over the loss of his first wife still. Oh, man. I've got like a whole story involved. And I'll be honest, I've never read or seen Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. So I'll have to see how close I was to the original book when this episode is done. Because goddamn, I've been writing it just as jokes. It's been great. So the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, about a year later as well, after his first appointment to hero, Jeff Davy. It stands as one of the most consequential legislative acts in U.S. history, both for its immediate impacts and for setting the stage for the country's future political landscape. Pushed forward by Senator Stephen A. Douglas of Illinois, its central premise was the concept of popular sovereignty, which allowed the settlers of a territory to decide for themselves whether to allow slavery or not. The act created two new territories, Kansas and Nebraska. While Nebraska was anticipated to be a free territory due to its northern location, the fate of Kansas was much, much more contentious. Previously, the Missouri Compromise of 1820 had prohibited slavery in this region. However, the Kansas-Nebraska Act effectively nullified that provision. And John A. Carmichael, a settler in the Kansas Territory, penned in his diary on June 10th, 1854, reading, "Tensions are high here in Lawrence. Neighbor against neighbor, all want to cast their vote on the matter of slavery. The town is divided, and I fear what might come of this. I fear primarily my wife may want to find comfort in the arms of one of our strong, supple field workers. I fear I myself may also want to find myself curled up in their big, strong, dark arms late at night and hear them whisper to me that everything will be okay. I fear the idea that I may want said strong, supple field worker to then also penetrate me whilst my wife looked on at the same time. These are the thoughts that keep me up at night." The fallout from the act was immediate and intense. Pro-slavery border ruffians from Missouri fled into Kansas to influence the vote in favor of slavery, leading to violent confrontations with the anti-slavery settlers. This period of strife came to be known as Bleeding Kansas. It was emblematic of the larger battle brewing between the North and the South. In a lot of ways, we can consider this the true start of the Civil War, right here. However, the act's repercussions extended far beyond the borders of Kansas and Nebraska. The divisive legislation deepened the schism within the Democratic Party and led to the dissolution of the Whig Party, whose members were split on the issue. Out of this political chaos, a new party coalesced around opposition to the expansion of slavery, the Republican Party. Dun, dun, dun! I do still find it fucking weird how the Republican Party was started and held the idea of, fuck slavery. And then it turned into what it became. I don't know. Kind of weird, right? Fucked with me a little bit. James H. Simmons, an early Republican organizer, wrote in a letter to a colleague on September 5th, 1854, "The Kansas-Nebraska blunder has given us a rallying point. Men of conscience from all corners are joining our ranks. We need a party dedicated to the principles of freedom, and I believe we're laying out its foundations." As the Republican Party solidified its position, figures like Abraham Lincoln, previously a Whig, found a new political home. The party would grow rapidly in strength, championing the cause of stopping slavery's expansion and setting the stage for the 1860 presidential election, motherfuckers. Woo woo! Time for election season. Woohoo! Let's go. But before that, let's go ahead and 2 years before that started, 1858, we have the Lincoln-Douglas debates. There were a series of 7 debates held throughout Illinois between Abraham Lincoln, the Republican candidate, and Stephen A. Douglas, the Democratic incumbent, vying for a seat in the U.S. Senate. while the direct outcome of these debates was Lincoln's defeat in the Senate race, their significance extended far beyond that immediate result. The core issue at hand during these debates was slavery. Obviously, people were like, should probably stop slavery, right? It's kind of fucked up if you really think about it. And even though I'm white, I'm starting to really think about it more and kind of feel bad for them. And then the Southerners were like, fuck you, stop thinking about it. That's essentially what happened here. They just didn't want people to think about it. They didn't want people to think. That's how you control sheep. They don't think, they just follow. Douglas defended his doctrine of popular sovereignty, the belief that territories should decide for themselves whether to become free or slave states, and Lincoln, on the other hand, argued against the expansion of slavery, emphasizing its moral wrongs while stopping short of calling for its immediate abolition. A lot of contemporaries debate on why he didn't outright call for the abolition of slavery here. My main theory is that he knew he needed to slowly, over time, convince the other side to see how wrong it was, and to have these new neighboring states show that they could coexist with each other. Also, potentially to prevent civil war, because I'm pretty sure everyone knew it was going to happen, especially with Kansas shit going on. In the second debate held in Freeport, Lincoln posed the now famous Freeport question, asking Douglas how he reconciled popular sovereignty with the U.S. Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision, which held that Congress had no authority to exclude slavery from the territories. Douglas's response, known as the Freeport Doctrine, asserted that territories could effectively prohibit slavery by refusing to adopt laws protecting it. So he was basically saying, well, like, they could still, if they decide to prohibit it, they could just not adopt laws that protect it. But, that wouldn't really stop slavery from happening, because then slavery wouldn't be illegal. But don't think about it too much, which is really stupid. I don't know. It's dumb. This answer satisfied Northern Democrats, but further alienated Southern ones, setting a stage for a split in the Democratic Party. And this is where we'll start to see Democrats get all... I'd say this is almost the beginning of like Democrats flipping over towards Republicans and Republicans flipping over Democrats that we'll see here, like where we're at now in the future. So, contemporary observer Clara Mayfield recorded her impressions in a letter dated August 28, 1858. The air was thick with tension in Freeport yesterday. Lincoln, with his towering presence, spoke with such conviction, and while Senator Douglas was no less formidable, there was a moment where I felt he was cornered. People around me whispered, sensing that these debates were about more than just a Senate seat. The debates drew enormous crowds and were extensively covered by newspapers. I mean, this had all the press coverage. Lincoln was getting a bunch of exposure here, which is really good for him. That's really good because, it's what's going to let him win the presidency. Everybody knew how smart and how eloquent of a guy he was. Eliza Tremaine, a journalist for Springfield Daily Monitor, wrote October 16th, 1858, though Lincoln may not secure a seat in the Senate this time around, he has won something potentially larger. A place in the hearts and minds of many Americans. His eloquence, moral clarity, and sharp wit have made him a figure to watch in the national arena. In essence, the Lincoln-Douglas debates encapsulated the nation's escalating tensions over slavery. I mean, like Kansas, the bleeding Kansas definitely was a little bit more intense, but shut up, don't think about it. And then 1859, 2 years before the Civil War begins, really, we have John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. In the annals of American history, there are very few events that capture the volatile atmosphere of the pre-Civil War era as poignantly as John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, right? This audacious act, conceived and executed by the fiery abolitionist John Brown in 1859, served as a stark reminder of the deep-seated passions and divisions surrounding the issue of slavery. John Brown, having previously earned a reputation for his heroic tactics, I'm calling it heroic. Back then, they would call it violent tactics against pro-slavery settlers in bleeding Kansas, conceived a plan to initiate a widespread slave rebellion in the South. His strategy was to capture the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, now West Virginia, arm the enslaved people, and march south, fomenting revolts as they went. On the night of October 16th, 1859, Brown, along with a group of 21 men, launched the raid. They quickly took control of the arsenal, but soon found themselves surrounded by local militias. And subsequently, the U.S. Marines, led by then Colonel Robert E. Lee. That's right. Robert E. Lee stopped this shit from happening. And goddamn racist motherfucker. Journal entry by the local resident Samuel W. Tilden, dated October 18th, 1859, paints a vivid picture. The town is in utter chaos. Brown and his men have barricaded themselves in the engine house, and shots ring out intermittently. There's talk that Brown aims to ignite a full-scale rebellion. Fear and uncertainty grip everyone. My cousin John Carmichael once feared that this happening in Kansas. And now I too share the same fear. I can't help but look on at John Brown's gorgeous, rippling muscles. He does seem like the sort of man that could make anyone fall in love with him. And it definitely wouldn't be weird to do so, because, I mean, look at him. Just look at him. His strong, oak-like thighs. Sweat dripping off his brow. His dark, dreamy eyes that seem to pierce into the soul and whisper, everything will be fine. Anyways, the rebellion is kind of scary, isn't it? After a 2-day standoff, the Marines stormed the engine house, capturing Brown and putting an end to the raid. While the raid itself was unsuccessful and led to the deaths of several of Brown's men, its repercussions were profound. The South was horrified, viewing the raid as evidence that the North was committed to the violent overthrow of the slave system. Which, I mean, yeah, they were. They really needed to be much earlier, but, whatever. Many began to feel that peaceful coexistence between the North and South was impossible, because it fucking was, because people were assholes. Goddamn. Anyways, conversely, while many Northerners condemned Brown's methods, they held him as a martyr for the abolitionist cause. In a letter to a friend, Northern journalist Harriet E. Adams wrote on November 3rd, 1859, "While I cannot condone the violence Mr. Brown employed, one cannot help but admire his unwavering commitment to the cause of freedom. His actions have struck a chord, and discussions abound in parlors and taverns alike. We are at a crossroads, and the very fabric of our nation is at stake." John Brown's subsequent trial and execution only intensified the polarized reactions. His final words, written in a note handed to a guard just before his hanging, prophesied, "I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood." Fucking metal as fuck thing to say. Goddamn, John Brown. You goddamn hero. Then we get to the election of 1860. It stands as probably one of, if not the most tumultuous election in American history. Almost as tumultuous as I'd say Trump's election was in 2016, and then subsequently Biden's election as well in 2020. So, means we're probably about to go to a civil war, folks. Woohoo! Anyways, the election itself was a reflection of the deep-seated divisions that everything I've said has built up from here. It featured 4 main candidates. So Stephen A. Douglas from the Northern Democratic Party, John C. Breckinridge from the Southern Democratic Party, John Bell from the Constitutional Union Party, and Abraham Lincoln from the Republican Party. Lincoln's platform, which opposed the expansion of slavery into the territories but did not call for its immediate abolition, was seen by many in the South as a direct threat to their way of life and economic system. The campaign was marked by intense rhetoric and deep regional divides. As the results pulled in on the night of November 6th, it became clear that Lincoln had secured the presidency. Despite not winning a single Southern state, his victory was largely due to his sweeping success in the populous northern states, which had more electoral votes, and technically more people as well. So, fuck the South. Fuck them. The reaction in the South was swift and visceral. Eliza Wharton, a resident of Charleston, South Carolina, wrote in her diary November 10th, 1860. "The city is aflame with indignation. Talk of secession fills the air. Many feel that with Lincoln's election, our rights, our property, and our very way of life are under siege. I fear what might come next. I also fear that my husband has been staring too longingly at one of our field worker boys, and he says the damnedest things like, hey, why don't you walk over there so I can watch you work out your creamy hamstrings more? He's always complimenting him, and lately has been refusing my advances in the bedroom, and I'm just scared. I'm scared about what Lincoln's doing to our country. Indeed, Lincoln's election acted as a catalyst for the secessionist movement. South Carolina, where many had long championed the idea of secession, became the first state to leave the Union on December 20th, 1860. Not even a full month after Lincoln won. They're like, fuck you guys, we're out. And they led to the formation of the Confederate States of America in early 1861. Henry Mitchell, a merchant from Philadelphia, expressed his bewilderment in a letter dated December 28th, 1860. The Union seems to be unraveling before our very eyes. It's hard to fathom that an election, a cornerstone of our democracy, could lead to such dire consequences. The future is uncertain, and there's tangible sense of foreboding everywhere. While Lincoln had hoped for reconciliation and did not initially seek to abolish slavery in states where it already existed, the South viewed his election as the final straw in a series of perceived aggressions by the North. The North was very passive-aggressive, and now we're a little too aggressive for them. So, the mere idea that the federal government, under Lincoln's leadership, might impede the expansion of slavery was intolerable to many in southern states. They're like, what are you talking about, boy? I can't have my slavery in these other states. How dare you? What if I wanted to buy some land there and have more workers come over there and work the land, field it, tilled it? Fuck you. I hate you now. In summary, the election of 1860 did not just change the leadership. It was essentially the very moment where the country divided itself. That was it. So, as the secessionist movement gained momentum in the wake of Lincoln's election, the newly seceded southern states quickly recognized the need for centralized leadership. Weird how that would be needed, right? All these assholes thinking they could just do everything on their own, and then immediately realizing they needed something of a central government, a federal government-esque. Super weird. I don't know. It's just crazy to me that they would do that. Yeah, after all of them were like, man, we just want to have the states to be able to do everything on their own. States can't apparently fight a fucking war on their own, can they? Goddamn stupid motherfuckers. Anyways, their answer was the establishment of the Confederate States of America, or the CSA. And at the helm, they placed Jefferson Davis, a figure who, with both military and political experience, as their president. Jefferson Davis, a Mississippian and former U.S. Senator, had been a staunch defender of the Southern way of life and the institution of slavery. His election as the Confederate president was not through popular vote, but a provisional vote of the Confederate Congress. He was inaugurated in Montgomery, Alabama, on February 18th, 1861, before the Confederacy's capital was later moved to Richmond, Virginia. A correspondent from the Savannah Daily News described the scene of Davis's inauguration. Montgomery was awash with banners, music, and palpable excitement. The air is thick with both the anticipation and anxiety, as Davis took the oath pledging to uphold the Constitution of the newly formed Confederacy. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause, punctuated with shouts of "Long live the South!" And I was there, and I witnessed many of the men in the crowd had brought along the favorite slave man or two. And they seemed to be having them massage their backs quite vigorously during the inauguration as well. Very weird. I don't get it, but each their own, I suppose. Davis's leadership style was hands-on, often involving himself in military strategy and detailed administrative matters. While some praised his dedication and commitment, others criticized him for being overly controlling and not delegating enough. Because again, a lot of these people are like, well, shouldn't the states decide everything for themselves besides, the need to unify and have an army that's available and shit? It's whatever. Lucy Hawthorne, resident of Richmond, said the cities above with the talk of President Davis. Basically, everyone was talking about him. And one of his early challenges was establishing legitimacy and unity among the Confederate states. While they shared a common goal, preserving the way of life and the institution of slavery, fuckers, the states were also fiercely protective of their individual rights, leading to internal tensions within the Confederacy. That's right. People who view themselves as the main character, if they all view themselves as the main character together, cannot work together. fucking assholes. Fucking dumb. Okay. And here we are, where the Civil War begins at Fort Sumter. The first shots of the American Civil War, a conflict that would shape the nation's identity and future, rang out at Fort Sumter in South Carolina's Charleston Harbor on April 12th, 1861. While the seeds of division had been sown long before this date, the confrontation at Fort Sumter would catalyze the nation into its bloodiest war. Fort Sumter, strategically positioned on an island in the harbor, was a symbol of federal authority in the heart of the secessionist South. By early 1861, it was one of the few military installations in the southern states still under Union control. South Carolina, having seceded in December 1860, viewed the fort as an affront to its sovereignty. And Major Robert Anderson led the small Union garrison at the fort. As the situation grew tense, supplies started dwindling, and there were calls for reinforcements. The newly inaugurated President Lincoln was faced with a difficult decision: risk war by sending reinforcements or relinquish the fort to Confederate forces. James A. Morgan, a Charleston resident, captured the suspenseful atmosphere in a letter dated April 10th, 1861. The city is on edge. Every gaze is directed towards the fort, waiting, watching. The presence of the Union soldiers in the heart of our harbor feels like a dagger poised at our throat. President Lincoln chose to resupply the fort. Informing South Carolina's governor of his decision in response before the supply ships could arrive, Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard demanded the fort's surrender, and Major Anderson refused. So at 4:30 in the morning on April 12th, after Anderson's refusal, Confederate batteries opened fire on Fort Sumter. The bombardment lasted 34 hours. Goddamn, it's crazy. Clara Willoughby, a nurse in Charleston, wrote in her journal, "The earth trembles with each cannon fire. The once tranquil harbor is now a cacophony of explosion, smoke, and anxiety. The reality of war, which seemed so distant, has suddenly arrived on our doorstep." Miraculously, despite the sustained bombardment, no one on either side was killed during the battle. You know, it kind of sucks none of the Southerners were killed, but whatever. However, facing insurmountable odds with conditions in the fort deteriorating rapidly, Major Anderson agreed to evacuate. On April 14th, Union forces formally surrendered the fort, and Anderson's men were allowed to leave in peace. The fall of Fort Sumter sent shockwaves across the country. The event made it clear that political solutions were no longer viable, and both the North and the South began preparing in earnest for the war. Volunteer enlistment surged in both regions, and the nation braced itself for the long and tumultuous struggle that lay ahead. In essence, while Fort Sumter was a relatively bloodless confrontation, its significance lay in its symbolism. It marked the end of compromises and the beginning of violence. And that brings us to the end of part 1 of the Civil War episode for today's historical quarrel. All right, y'all. Sorry, I did want to try and get through everything I had written, but I have literally 100 pages here of info. And so, yeah, it's give me a long one. So part 2, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just end up covering a bit more information in the Civil War than I was originally planning on, and recording it more, and then also probably taking time on some of the jokes a little more, like I did for this episode. I have a lot of jokes written out, but yeah. Anyways, my thoughts on this episode and everything that happened. I feel like I've already expressed my opinions on a lot of it, but goddamn, it was fascinating to me to see the parallelisms between Jefferson Davis and Abraham Lincoln, who were both born in Kentucky. What are the odds, right? It's crazy. And both of them would be the leaders of either side of this division. I've also found it fascinating how what essentially started as Puritan and separatist ideologies and beliefs slowly evolved and morphed into what has now become what became the Federalist and Anti-Federalist ideologies and culture, just based off of people's core principles and belief in religion. And it's become more of this like political thought and higher thought. A lot of that has to do with education and improvements in that field for America. But a lot of that, too, just still does stem from the culture that was established here in America at first. Also, Thomas Jefferson and fucking John Adams mudslinging campaign. I am seriously so excited to do like a full episode on and a breakdown of that. That's going to be so fun. It'll probably be like later on next year when I do that, just because I want to give it time after I've done fucking all of this, like where I'm essentially retelling a whole bunch of American history up till modern times. You're getting like an advanced American history class with me, and I hope that's fun. I hope it's been a good time for you. If you like this episode, you found it funny, you found any part of it enjoyable, if you found this song that I made enjoyable, please leave a review. Let me know what you think. Please share this with a friend. Let's help keep growing this show. I like to grow the show into something big. I like to eventually turn this into something more than just a hobby. I mean, if you didn't find value in it, I guess, I understand, but cool, man. But yeah, sorry again. I really did want to try and do the full thing, but no, sorry. Did not have a lot of time this morning to do all the recording that I wanted to try and do. It's like 5:00 at night on Sunday, and this episode is already over 2 hours long. And if I would have continued, I probably would have gone to like 3.5 hours, which I don't know. Maybe some of you would have liked. I did a 2 hour and 45 minute episode last time. So I felt like that was too long. I felt like that was way too long. So you guys tell me if this is something that you want and you want me to do like super long episodes, like I'm talking like 3-4 hours a pop. Let me know. And then you definitely will have to be sharing the shit with a lot of people, because if you want me to commit that sort of time to recording and editing within the same day, I'm going to need a lot more people with eyes on this. And then I'm going to need to get sponsors just so I can fund this time and I can make sure that it's, not being fucking, I don't know. If I'm going to be taking time away from time that I can spend with my family and friends and stuff, I'd at the very least like to have something to show for it other than, hey, look at this cool thing I made, which is nice. I mean, I don't mind it and I feel proud of this show. It's easier if my listeners are able to share this with a friend and then their friends are able to share it with a friend and so on and so on. That's the best way to grow. It's the best way to do it. Hands down, for sure. I was going to try and do a audio. I did some video for today's episode, and some clips of that will be released. You'll get to see me. Not that cool to look at, but you will get to see my face on some clips that I do. Probably some shorts that I put on the YouTube channel. We still haven't decided on the LLC name. We will eventually. When we finally do decide on that, then the YouTube channel name will be switched to that. It'll probably be something Productions, not literally something Productions, but just like, adjective, noun, productions, essentially is how a lot of production companies do it. So we figured we'd just kind of keep going with the same formula there. Hopefully my Southern accent wasn't too atrocious. I thought it wasn't too bad myself. And yeah, I don't know. Just, I don't know. Thank you guys so much for listening. It does mean a lot to me. Just you guys listening means a lot. So thanks for leaving likes, for the reviews you have left. Like I said, just share with people that you think would find this fascinating, fun, or just funny, or share it with someone that you think would hate it too. I don't know. Just fucking spread it. I've been spreading it around to everybody I know. So, and they've, a lot of your friends and family, when you do a project like this, when you're kind of like expressive with your art aren't going to necessarily listen to it. It feels weird for them in a lot of ways. It's just different for them, I guess. Well, I may feel like I'm authentic in my delivery a lot of times. I know some of the way that I like to tell stories can come off as like almost theater, kind of like dramatic, where I've definitely toned that down a lot since I first started. But, for them, it's just still that idea of like, oh, man, my buddy wants me to listen to this. It's like, I want to, but like he's asking me to listen to it. And which I totally get. I mean, that's how I feel when people do that to me. So, I'm not like mad about it. It's just like, yeah, no, I get it. It's fine. So if you have friends who you think would feel that way, maybe don't share it with them, or maybe do. It might take some time to get them to listen to an episode or two, but once they do, they might like it and they might not. Also, I know I realized that song I did about getting a new mom for Abe was kind of fucked up, but I had so much fun doing that. So prepare for something equally fucked up next episode. It's going to be just as bad. But that's all for today. I love you guys. Spread the violence, spread the quarrels, delve into history more. Do what you got to do. Tyler out.